world was divided before race was created. The descendants of Japheth. Okay, so you should be coming from part 3 of this series. These videos are a part of a docu-series. It should be watched from the beginning in order if you're going to understand what is being presented. So please, if you have not watched parts 1 through 3, please stop this video and start back from video 1 and watch them consecutively for true context. Okay, well, like I said in parts 1 through 3, we are not black people. But again, this statement still needs a lot more information in order for the point to be validated and to be true. In the last part, we went through how the world was divided before race and skin color. In that discussion, we discussed one of the sons of Noah, which was Ham. Let's continue with this discussion and go over another son of Noah. We'll skip over Shem and go to Japheth, who we know as the Japhites. This is probably the least discussed son of Noah, and there is a reason why. Genesis chapter 10, verses 2 through 5 goes over the children of Japheth. It says, the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. Verse 5 of chapter 10 says, from these, the coastland people of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations. So, Japheth occupied the Isle of the Gentiles, which were the shore territories of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and parts of Asia Minor, from where they dispersed northward over the entire continent of Europe and a great part of Asia. Japheth's descendants traveled west, north, and northeast of the mountain of Ararat and the Caucasus Mountains. The Japhites settled near the mountains Taurus and Amanus in Turkey. They journeyed to the river Tanai in southeast Russia and along Europe to Cadiz, Spain. Let's talk about the sons of Japheth. Again, they were Gomer, Magog, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Again, this is Genesis chapter 10, verse 2. Gomer was the ancestor of the first Cimmerians and of the later Cimbri. These people include offshoots of the Celtic family and of the present-day Gaels of Ireland, Scotland, and the Hebrides Islands. Then, the second son of Japheth was Magog. Flavius Josephus said that the Greeks called these people Scythians. The Scythians included all the wandering tribes who dwelt mostly near the north of the Black and Caspian Seas. They later migrated to Central Asia, Russia, and the Ukraine. The third son of Japheth was Madai, the father of the Medes. They were located at the southern part of the Caspian Sea, and they later united with the Persians to form one people, which we know as the Medo-Persians. The fourth son of Japheth was Javan, better as Yavan, being that the letter J did not exist at their beginning. From him came the Ionians and all the Greeks. We also find Ashkenaz, the son of Gomer, Japheth's grandson, who formed the Germanic race, better known as the Germans. In the Hebrew language, the word Ashkenaz literally means Germans. So when anyone claims to be a son of Ashkenaz or to be Ashkenazi, they are claiming to be a son of Japheth. Anyway, Tubal the fifth son of Japheth is associated with Yavan. The scriptures state, I will set a sign among them, and those among them who escape I will send to the nations, to Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tubal and Javan, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my fame nor seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 19. You see, Meshech and Tubal are nations of the north. There are Meshech and Tubal and all their multitudes, with all their graves around it, all of them uncircumcised, slain by the sword, though they caused their terror in the land of the living. Ezekiel chapter 32, verse 26. What's prophesied for them in the future is not very good. Josephus identified the descendants of Tubal with the early Iberians. Now the last son of Japheth was Tiras, the father or ancestor of the Thracians. This land, Thrace, was situated north of Turkey Asia Minor, and northeast of Greece. In the 4th century, the Germanic tribes were on the move. They were known under these names: the Lombards, Burgundians, Franks, Saxons, Angles, Jutes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Suevis, and Vandals. These 10 Germanic barbarian tribes settled all over Western Europe, and they intermingled with themselves, creating these modern nations of Western Europe as we know them today, which is where we get Europeans. Understand, the children of Japheth are where we get the Europeans from today. The reason why they don't speak about this history in a great way is because it does not align with the doctrine of white supremacy. White supremacy must be made to feel and be the dominant leaders of the world. And though in our modern history they absolutely can be claimed to be in dominance and power and control, I mean, that's undeniable, they control most of the world today. But when you actually know who they are, and then you actually apply the Bible that they have controlled, how we read it, and what we know, we can know where this dominance will actually lead them. For instance, the Most High is completely against many of these sons of Japheth. Yahuwah prophesies this: "And the word of Yahuwah came unto me, saying, Son of Adam, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn you back, and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you forth, and all your army, horses, and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Cush, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah, the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with you. Be prepared and prepare yourself, you and all your company that are assembled unto you, and be you a guard unto them. After many days you shall be visited. In the latter years you shall come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of my people, against the mountains of Yasharel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. You shall ascend and come like a storm. You shall be like a cloud to cover the land, you and all your bands, and many people with you. Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into your mind, and you shall think an evil thought. And you shall say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil, and to take a prey, to turn your hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land." That's Ezekiel chapter 38, verses 1 through 12. Also it says, "Therefore, son of Adam, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, Behold, I am against you, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you back, and leave but the sixth part of you, and will cause you to come up from the north parts, and will bring you upon the mountains of Yasharel. And I will smite your bow out of your left hand, and will cause your arrows to fall out of your right hand. You shall fall upon the mountains of Yasharel, you and all your bands, and the people that is with you. I will give you unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. You shall fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, says Adonai Yahuwah. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Yahuwah." It's Ezekiel chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. You see, these are the tribes of the people of Europe, and also Africa, that will come against Yah's chosen people when they dwell securely, but they will be destroyed. This is their history, and because of what is prophesied of them, our knowledge is not given about them. Their doctrines and their ways of this world is what most of us are following. When we're following this world system, we are following the people of Japheth, because they have been used to come against Yah's chosen people during the times of Jacob's trouble, and they are still being used to come against Yah's chosen people in the final last days. The people that are today classified as the white races, they began near the Caucasus Mountains, and from there they spread north, northwest, and northeast into Europe and Asiatic Russia. Now, we obviously know today the Japhites, what we call Europeans, or what we call white today. The question is, were they originally white from the beginning from their ancestor Japheth, or did a change materialize in the skin color of the descendants of Japheth? The question, it's difficult to answer. And anyone who speaks with conviction as if they know either way, they're lying. There have been people that have said that Japheth was a black man, but he wanted to be white. So God changed him to be a white man. To me, that is ridiculous. And if it were true, I think our Father would have showed this to us in his word. So I reject that story unless someone else can prove it to me in the word. Now, what kind of makes more sense to me? There are scientists and anthropologists who have found different kinds of mutations in certain parts of the world. You see, a physical mutation is a sudden variation or change, the offspring differing from its parents in some outstanding characteristic. For instance, there are blonde-haired people among the darker-skinned Australian Aboriginals, or those with blue eyes. That is not what we have normally seen. This is an example of that mutation. Albinos are also a good example of mutation with their white skin, woolly hair, and thick lips. Don't be offended by the word mutation. Any sudden change from the normal is to be regarded as a mutation. When Japhites separated at the Tower of Babel, the theory is, and what is most probable, is that they turned white. You see, there are many biblical cases of individuals turning white-skinned. Understand, there are a few occasions that the Bible does speak on skin color. Yahuwah the Most High is not concerned with the color of our skin, but how much of our heart is for him. But let's look at some scriptures that do speak about skin color. First one we will look at is with Moses. Yah wanted to show Moses a miracle, so he turned Moses' hand white. Then he turned it back to its original color. Exodus chapter 4, verses 6 and 7 says, "Furthermore, Yahuwah said to him, 'Now put your hand in your bosom.' And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous, like snow. And he said, 'Put your hand in the bosom again.' So he put his hand in his bosom again, and drew it out of his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh." Exodus chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. You see, so there was a difference in the color of his skin versus white skin. This is what a form of leprosy is. The skin turning white. This is what leprosy looks like. Now, I know people will say, no, this is vitiligo. But vitiligo is a modern name for this condition. It was not spoken of like this in the biblical times. And this is why they had conditions in the Torah in regards to whether it's clean or unclean. But let's continue. Who did Moses marry? He married an Ethiopian, a Cushite from the line of Ham. We know there is no argument from people that the skin color of the Hamites, specifically the Ethiopians, that they were dark-skinned, that they called them black. Moses married an Ethiopian woman, and Moses' brother and sister were angry about it, and Yah did the same thing to his sister. Then Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1. And then later on in the same chapter, verse 10, it says, "And when the cloud departed from above the tabernacle, suddenly Miriam became leprous, as white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and there she was, a leper." Numbers chapter 12, verse 10. Same thing done to Moses was done to his sister. There's also a story in 2 Kings chapter 5 of Elisha's servant being cursed with leprosy and turning white as snow. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master. But by him, Yahuwah had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who was in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy." And Naaman went in and told his master, saying, "Thus and thus said the girl who was from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, "Now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may heal him of his leprosy." And it happened, when the king of Israel read the letter, that he tore his clothes and said, "Am I Elohim to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Therefore, please consider, see how he seeks a quarrel with me. So it was, when Elisha, the man of Elohim, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king, saying, Why have you torn your clothes? Please, let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. But Naaman became furious, and went away, and said, Indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me, and stand, and call on the name of Yahuwah, his Elohim, and wave his hand over the place, and heal the leprosy. Are not the Abana and the Parfa, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in a rage. And her servants came near and spoke to him, said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, Wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of Elohim. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. And he returned to the man of Elohim, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him. And he said, Indeed, now I know that there is no Elohim in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant. But he said, As Yahuwah lives, before whom I stand, I will receive nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, Then, if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth. For your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to Yahuwah. Yet in this thing, may Yahuwah pardon your servant. When my master goes into the temple of Rha'mel to worship there, and he leads on my hand, and I bow in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may Yahuwah please pardon your servant in this thing. Then he said to him, Go in peace. So he departed from him a short distance. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of Elohim, said, Look, my master has spared Naaman this Syrian, while not receiving from his hands what he brought. But as Yahuwah lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me, saying, Indeed, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. So Naaman said, Please, take 2 talents. And he urged him, and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants. And they carried them on ahead of him. When he came to the citadel, he took them from their hand and stored them away in the house. Then he let the men go, and they departed. Now he went in and stood before his master. Elisha said to him, Where did you go, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant did not go anywhere. And he said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence, leprous, as white as snow. That's 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 27. You see, this curse that Elisha put on Gehazi, this type of leprosy, it affected the reproductive organs in his body. This meant that all his children would produce white offsprings, even though his skin was darker before. So from this, we do know that this can happen. And so while we don't know the origin of the white skin, and I'm not saying it is a curse, obviously, but just that people can change and it can be passed down through descendants, I'm just providing biblical evidence for my claim. So for the question of how did Japheth become white, the answer is I don't have one, nor does anybody. But there is biblical proof that it can happen. And that's all we really need to know. But the classification of skin, it does not matter. That's why I keep trying to say anyway. Please understand that ancient people did not classify races according to skin color, like the modern nations of Europe and America do today. The ancients, including the Greeks and Romans, identified people according to their national or tribal names. They used such names as Visigoths, Vandals, Saxons, Ethiopians, Carthaginians, Yahudim, Arabs, Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians, they did not use the term Negro or Caucasian, which again, these are modern terms. And they definitely did not use the classification of white people and black people. As I said in part 2 of this series, dividing the world along a color line was an idea that originated with the white supremacists in Europe after the Renaissance. Extremely dumbed down. We speak in terms and ways that our oppressors have taught us. And even the Europeans, who are not in control, but are just as controlled, they just don't know it, they are just as mind controlled as us. But because they have been programmed to see themselves in a position of power, they don't recognize how used and manipulated they have been. The whole world is manipulated. It's not just the Negroes. The whole world is manipulated and conditioned to see through modern eyes that lack an understanding of history. And the goal of it is to lead everyone to hell. Think about how, after all this information of just going over 2 out of the 3 sons of Noah, all this information about how the world was divided and who we all descend from, please think about how ignorant it is to just identify someone by their skin color. It is as ignorant as defining someone by their nose. Imagine us saying pointy nose or flat nose. I mean, do you know how dumb that sounds? That's how dumb it sounds when we refer to each other by black people or white people. But again, please know that with this information, those Europeans who are classified as white people, they can still take this information and go back and review from which son of Japheth they descend from, because their knowledge of self was never removed. It was just hidden by some ancestors. For those of us who they just want us to consider ourselves as black or Afro, whatever, we still don't know who we are, even with this knowledge, because our history was stolen from us. But education and research can change all of that. And I am not talking about that fake education everyone has that makes them feel smart while they're dumb as a brick. I don't care about your stupid degrees from your oppressors. I'm talking about self-education that is done independently away from the mainstream. Everything that you're taught in these institutions is created to keep you dumb and unaware and without knowledge of self. It's all intentional. When we go back and relearn, we become a problem for the system, which is why they don't want us doing it. A scene from one of my favorite shows when I was a child, it shows this. In a different world, where Dwayne Wayne said this.
Who are you? That's just it. He's nobody.
No, I am an educated black man. Your worst nightmare, punk.
I mean, we all know that scene. Now, with what I know now, that black man part still bothers me, but we all know what he means. When we are educated in the truth of this world, their lies have little effect upon us. Unfortunately, we took that line saying that if we go to college and become educated, then we become their worst nightmare. But that's another part of the whole mind control lie. If you apply it in that way, you're just a part of the system and you're controlled. That was part of my problem early on when I went to these schools and tried to get these fake degrees. Anyway, what I'm trying to do is bring you back into power away from your enemy. And in order to do that, it requires humility on your part to recognize this hard to hear truth. The truth that you need to hear and say to yourself is that I am a victim of white supremacy that has been indoctrinated into me before I even took my first breath. My parents, my grandparents, and their parents were all victims, and it was passed down to me. I know what my oppressors have taught me. I was brought up in their schools and have dedicated my life to being successful in their system. My life has been dedicated to white supremacy, and in order to liberate myself, I need to wake up and stop being controlled and being a tool. You know, it's hard to admit that we are being controlled and that we're a tool, but that's why I say it takes humility. When you actually really understand what they were doing, it allows you to take steps back and actually fix the problem. Now also, for those on the outside of this, you may get triggered when you hear me say white supremacy. I get it, because you yourselves, maybe you're not like this. Let me say that everything that I just repeated is not just for people that look like me, but it goes for you as well. You were under white supremacy too. You might only hear it in a dividing way because you see skin color. It is so much deeper than that, as I'm trying to say. This is unedited truth that needs to be heard, but I do know it's hard to hear. So it's easier to speak against me instead of recognizing all the evidence I've shown and all the truth in this world that points to it. I'm just trying to help you look at things in a different way, from a different vantage point. This is the history of the world, and the Bible is a great source for history that pretty much gets overlooked. As you can see from these last two videos, if you just do the slightest amount of research about these descendants, the history from the Bible is proven true, and it can provide great understanding about our world. So in part 3, we went over the sons of Ham. In this part, we went over the sons of Japheth. In the next part, we will move on to the sons of Shem, and this will give us a strong understanding of the division of this world. For many of you watching, you are the dry bones, and it's time that you are awakened. And this series is going to do just that. So now that you understand more about one of the main classifications in this world through understanding the descendants of Ham and Japheth, please continue on to the next part, and please allow me to explain more to you about the next classification group, which is Shem. I hope this has got you thinking. Right now, like I said, many of you are the dry bones. And as Ezekiel chapter 37 verse 11 says, you may believe your hope is lost, and you yourselves are cut off. But I am here to show you the complete opposite is true, that your hope is not lost, and you yourselves are not cut off, if you just awaken and be who you truly are. So I will show you. Click the link to the next video, and let's talk some more.